We have had a reaction from Paul Pogba. I will read out what he has to say. He says, "I have today been informed by the anti-doping tribunal of their decision, and I believe that the verdict is incorrect. I'm sad, shocked and heartbroken that everything I have built in my professional playing career has been taken away from me. When I'm free of legal restrictions, the full story will become clear, but I have never knowingly or deliberately taken any supplements that violate anti-doping regulations. As a professional athlete, I would never do anything to enhance my performance by using banned substances and have never disrespected or cheated fellow athletes and supporters of any of the teams I have played for or against. As a consequence of the decision announced today, I will appeal this before the Court of Arbitration for Sport." So that is the instant reaction from Paul Pogba, brought to us via his media advisors, the Ashton Media Group.
Kaveh, thank you. Let's get more on this with our senior reporter, Geraint Hughes. Let's look forward and back on this. Geraint, if we can, first of all, back, how did we get to this point?
Yeah, interesting just hearing what Kaveh was saying there. A couple of points I will pick on. We've got there because he failed a doping test, a standard doping test. He was an unused sub for a game for Juventus against Udinese back in August. It was made public in September. It goes through a process with anti-doping agencies, and the Italian National Anti-Doping Agency is signed up to the WADA code. It is part of the family of national associations that make up the World Anti-Doping Agency, and they abide by the protocols and the banned list of substances, illegal substances that any athlete cannot ingest. And they are illegal, and it's set out and it's reviewed every few years as well, that list. It's very, very clear. Then I think you alluded to as well, Nick, there was the opportunity for mitigation through a plea bargain with the Italian authorities, which Pogba chose not to go down that route. Then the Italian National Agency went to the courts in Italy, went through the tribunal there, and that began in December. That process now concluding with this 4-year ban today that we report from our colleagues in Sky Italy are saying, and that is the standard ban that is passed down by the World Anti-Doping Agency, the WADA code. And as I say, the National Anti-Doping Agency of Italy, they are signed up to that code. It is a 4-year ban. It can come down to with mitigating circumstances, but let's maybe just pick up on some of those points from Pogba's statement just then. You can understand the emotional side of it, with the sad, the disappointment, the heartfelt sort of nature of the impact on what has gone before in his career and what may come back. But shocked, we shouldn't necessarily be shocked by what has happened today, because the process when it comes to anti-doping and an anti-doping agency like Italy that is signed up to the WADA code, it is very, very clear and it's very, very structural. And Paul Pogba will be treated no differently from any other athlete. Football, rugby, cricket, golf, a sprinter, a swimmer, every sport at the Olympics that you can think of, every sport on the planet that signs up to it. He's not being treated differently because he's a footballer or because he's Paul Pogba. He is an athlete of many who go through this process with national anti-doping agencies and then through the World Anti-Doping Code as well. So he shouldn't necessarily be shocked by what has happened over the course of the last 5 months. Also as well, clearly in his statement, he used the words, "I have never knowingly or deliberately taken a substance." Yes, you can see the emotional side of that. Or if he's accidentally taken something, it doesn't matter. Strict liability for any athlete of any sport, of any gender. What goes into an athlete's body is solely down to Paul Pogba, as it is any other athlete. It doesn't matter that it is Paul Pogba. That is the rules. Those are the rules that any athlete in any sport play by. So that is why the reason that this decision has come to from the National Anti-Doping Agency of Italy, of going through the processes they have in Italy and going through the processes that they are signed up to with the World Anti-Doping Agency as well. So it shouldn't be a shock. And again, it doesn't matter if he didn't know what he was taking or whether he didn't deliberately take something. What goes into an athlete's body, strict liability, it is upon them. Those are the rules.
And talking of processes, Geraint, what happens now?
Yeah, well, it isn't over. I mentioned it in my last answer very early on about mitigation. That one process he turned down the plea bargain because he obviously believes that he is not guilty of this charge. But he does have another option now by appealing to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. We have heard so much, haven't we, over the last decade, where athletes or teams have taken complaints or appeals to CAS. They will go through everything. They're essentially like an appeal court for an athlete or for an organisation as well. It works both ways. That will go through the Pogba case, and they will determine an outcome of whether the sanction handed down by the National Anti-Doping Agency in with the rules of WADA, whether that was compliant with Paul Pogba's case. They will look at that, but also, WADA are very clear as well. With this going to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, if they were to uphold an appeal by Paul Pogba, i.e. agree with him, well then they will have another right of appeal, and it could eventually end up not just at the Court of Arbitration for Sport, but within the Swiss courts. That being because CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, comes under the jurisdiction of the Swiss federal courts there. So it could still have a long way to run if, especially, that CAS maybe agree with Paul Pogba. However, if CAS do not agree with Paul Pogba and they agree with the sanction handed down by the Italian anti-doping agency and their national tribunal as well, then his recourse through the course becomes very much diminished. But it's not over yet. But the process of where Paul Pogba is at the moment is very clear, and many athletes before him have been in this position before, and it's a very, very difficult and challenging time for him now, especially with the legal aspect. He's been through a lot of it. If the Court of Arbitration for Sport doesn't go his way, he doesn't have an awful lot of manoeuvrability after that.